There are few shows out there that hit the same way as Samurai Champloo, an incredibly underrated anime that truly embraces the words, it's not about the destination, but the journey there and the company we keep along it. It follows a group of free people, Mugen, a wandering outlaw from the Ryukyu Islands, Jin, the reserved and mysterious Ronin, and Fu, a waitress who saves the other two's lives in exchange for helping her find a samurai who smells of sunflowers. The show focuses on the adventures the free have during their journey, encountering all sorts of different characters along the way, exploring unique locations, and experiencing new cultures. In fact, the word Champloo comes from the Okinawan word champuru, which primarily refers to a stir-fry dish that combines a mix of ingredients, but can also refer to the mix of cultures that make up Okinawa, which throughout its history has been influenced by traditional Okinawan, Japanese, Chinese, American, and many other Asian cultures, due to its trading status. While the show takes place in the Edo period of Japan, it takes a lot of modern influences, such as a heavy emphasis on the hip-hop aesthetic that is incorporated in the show's style and music. While it's an amazing show that I recommend everyone to check out, I'm not here to talk about the anime, but rather to check out the video game adaptation of it. By the way, if you haven't watched Samurai Champloo yet, shame on you, but worry not, as this game features a completely original story, so I won't be spoiling anything from the anime. Samurai Champloo Sidetracked is a PlayStation 2 game which released in Japan on the 23rd of February 2006 and later on April 11th in North America. It was published by Namco Bandai and developed by Grasshopper Manufacturer, the studio famous for games such as No More Heroes, Lollipop Chainsaw, and The Silver Case. After their release of Killer 7, Grasshopper wasn't doing as well financially as they would have liked, so had to resort to taking on contract work, which included working on several anime games, with the others being a game adaptation of an anime called Blood Plus, and they even made an Evangelion rhythm game a few years later, which I already covered on this channel. Samurai Champloo was the first of these projects and was an action-adventure game that acts as a lost chapter that is disconnected from the main story of the anime. You get to play as both Mugen and Jin, who have their own story modes as they get wrapped up in a political conflict in Ezo, a region better known as Hokkaido today. While the two characters' stories overlap at times, they generally have their own side adventures. The game wasn't received all too well, getting mixed reviews, and while it is a bit of a janky mess with an awful camera and a fairly button-mashy combat, it does have enough to offer to make this an overall fun experience, with a lot of interesting and unique mechanics, and a story that is told in a way that truly captures the feeling of Samurai Champloo. Anyway, let's not waste any more time and have a look at Samurai Champloo Sidetracked. After booting up the game, we get a choice of who we want to play as. It doesn't really matter who you pick first, and you can even jump between the characters as the game is split into chapters which take place roughly during the same time. For my playthrough, I played as Mugen first and then as Jin, and I will be going through the story the exact same way. But there is definitely merit to jumping between them if you want to experience the story more chronologically. Chapter 0 is pretty much the same for both characters. We are introduced to our three main protagonists as they journey south in search of the samurai who smells of sunflowers. Often hungry and penniless, they do odd jobs to keep their stomachs full. On one of those hungry days, they encounter a boat offering some free food, which they get on without much thought. After a long sail, the three end up in the northern region of Japan known as Ezo, the very opposite direction of where they were actually traveling. The developers of this game had a lot of freedom in the creation of this game and specifically picked this location to contrast the main character's travels to the south in the show. As they disembark in these new snowy lands, they are attacked by a group of ninjas, and we get our first look into the combat and gameplay of this game. Square and triangle are your light and heavy attacks respectively. You can see the combos available to you on the top of the screen. This is actually a unique mechanic of the game, as you can switch between the two equipped rhythm tracks with the right analog stick to change the combo tree available to you, which in turn changes what attacks you can perform. You receive new tracks from beating certain chapters, and you can also buy some from the store. At the beginning of every chapter, you will get the ability to visit a music store where you can change which two tracks you want to equip for the level ahead. Besides just changing your moveset, they do change the background music that plays as well, and some of them even have extra beneficial effects, such as boosting your stats. Although there doesn't seem to be anywhere in the game where you are told what effects a track may have. It's a really cool concept, reflecting well on the anime's strong ties to music. It definitely has more potential than we can see in the game though, as a lot of the combos you have available are fairly simple and much of the game ends up being a lot of button mashing really, with bosses being an exception to this. But this idea mixed with something like Hi-Fi Rush's rhythm-based combat would be a really fun combination. While the controls for Jin and Mugen are pretty much the same, they have vastly different combat styles, with Mugen having a much more chaotic fighting style, incorporating breakdancing moves, and Jin being a more traditional samurai. Their X moves are also different, with Mugen being able to jump and Jin doing a backwards roll, which also changes his stance, altering his combos. Circle is your technique button, which if you press at the same time as the enemy attacks, you will be able to do a technique guard where you can press any of the face buttons to do different counterattacks. You can actually just mash circle with Mugen to get it, but Jin will do a forward roll if there's no attack to guard against. Another type of counterattack you can do is by having your attack clash with the enemies. A quick time event will pop up where you have to press one of the buttons that shows up to perform a move. There's another technique where if you clash attacks and the circle meter is red, you can press circle to do a special technique counter which will ensure the QTE button that appears is square, and you will be able to enter hyper mode, which for a very short time will turn the screen red and make you move with incredible speed. It is a bit finicky to perform though, and I don't think I still fully get it. Even the dojo in this game that's supposed to teach you gets it wrong, as it kept telling me I pressed circle too late when in fact I was pressing it too early. In the bottom left of the screen you have your tension gauge, which will increase as you successfully attack enemies and decrease if you get hit. The little dude above it is the danceman, and he'll be grooving alongside you throughout your adventure. As you fill up the tension gauge, the danceman will start going crazy and your combo tree will expand. You will also notice some of the listed moves will have a red outline. If you manage to perform the combo that leads to it, and make sure that the highlighted move strikes an enemy, you will enter hyper mode, though for a bit longer than when you do it through a technique counter. The super speed you get really trivializes a lot of the game, especially early on, as it is quite easy to enter hyper mode and the enemies can't do much about it. Alongside how easy it is to trigger a counterattack by clashing, this game lets you get away with a lot of button mashing. It doesn't help that most of this game is fairly empty hallways with a slow trickle of enemies appearing, as they can't handle having more than 4 opponents on the screen. As you continue performing well, a star will appear above the danceman, signaling that one of the enemies has been marked. They'll have the same star above their head, and if you hit them, you will enter Tate mode, a short minigame where you have to mash the face buttons to get 100 hits in. The time limit here is based on the points you got while in the stage, which you can see in the top right. If you don't get 100 hits, the enemy is still defeated and drops a lot of money. The points don't reset either unless you hit the goal, meaning you will have more time the next time it happens. If you do manage to get the 100 hits in, you will enter trance mode, another minigame where you have to defeat 100 enemies, although each enemy will go down in one hit, and you yourself have 3 lives which also go down with each hit. After beating the 51st enemy, you do get 1 extra life though. This seemed like a cool mode at first, but with how long it takes to mash through 100 enemies, it becomes really quickly tedious. If you manage to enter hyper mode here, it won't actually run out, making this an insanely mindless mash fest, and the rewards you get are really not worth the controller abuse. If you do get all 100 enemies, you will unlock a weapon that you can buy in the shop. And if there are no weapons to unlock, or you didn't hit the goal, you will unlock a piece of art for the game's gallery. When that is fully unlocked, you just get some cash instead. That means after you get all the weapons, there really doesn't seem to be any point in trying to complete it each time. I think this could have been better if it was time-based instead, seeing how many enemies you can defeat in a short time frame. As the way it is, while cool to look at visually, it really overstays its welcome. For the rest of the controls, L1 lets you put up your guard, R1 lets you lock onto the closest enemy, R2 toggles the minimap, and L2 allows you to switch weapons with the D-pad. You can equip up to 2 weapons at the blacksmith, which just act as an attack boost. Your moves remain exactly the same, and as you use the weapons, their durability decreases. Once it reaches 0, the weapon breaks. Your main weapon has infinite durability though, so you don't need to worry about that. These are only really useful on bosses in my opinion. That about covers most of the controls for the game. There is a surprising amount of nuance to it, though unfortunately the enemy and level design don't fully utilize it. Like I mentioned, at most you will ever have 4 enemies spawn at the same time, although usually that number is only 3. There are only really a few different enemy types, and hyper mode can really carry you far without breaking a sweat. The levels themselves are incredibly basic, consisting mainly of hallways with sometimes a small side path for some items, such as healing, money, weapon repairs, or tension boosts. The only thing stopping you from just rushing by all the enemies are these gates that require payment for you to proceed. You will need to collect a certain amount of kobans, which are seemingly randomly dropped by enemies, alongside normal money, which you can use at the stores in town. Despite kobans being straight up money, the gatekeepers will only accept those, but any remaining ones you have at the end of the level will get converted into normal cash. The gameplay parts of this game got quite boring after a while. I tried to fight as many enemies as I could at first, but after a while I just wanted to get through them as fast as possible to get to more story, which just ended up with me needing to backtrack to collect the necessary kobans. Besides the story, I think the bosses are a lot more well made for the most part, and forced me to actually adapt and not just go ape mode on the controller, but we'll get to those as we get through the story. Overall, this game is thankfully incredibly lenient. If you ever get a game over, you can start right back at the same screen, with all your money, kobans, and even the tension gauge remaining the same as when you died. However, that means if you used one of the extra weapons, the durability will also not recover. Something to note for bosses, so you don't just waste your expensive weapons trying to learn patterns. Otherwise, game overs only really have an effect on your ranking screen, which of course this game has, but that only nets you extra money, which is really not an issue. With all that out of the way, let's get back to Mugen's story. We defeat the 8 ninjas that the mission asks us to, and encounter a witch who, with her own dance moves, curses Mugen and feeds him the snake. With that, he falls to the ground, and as he loses consciousness, a mysterious man approaches him. We get the classic anime game results screen, which gives you a rank that is a bit hard to make sense of, but it seems I'm a Run Champloo this time around. With the prologue done, we can move on to chapter 1, which gives us some backstory to what's happening in this region. The Matsumai clan who reigns over Ezo has granted special rights to foreigners that has diversified the community there. However, these same people have also been oppressing the natives, who have been massacred and driven away from their sacred land. Now, only the Tsurumaki clan remain, still trying to reclaim their home. Their leader is Worso Tsurumaki, who continues to fight, but too is struggling with the fatigue his body is taking. The natives of Ezo that are featured in the story of this game refer to a real indigenous group called the Ainu, which resided primarily in the Hokkaido regions as well as some of the surrounding areas. The Ainu people still exist today, with around 12,000 people reported for official surveys, though the real number is estimated to be much higher, with around 200,000, with a lot of Ainu being historically forcibly assimilated into the Japanese culture, resulting in many people today being completely unaware of their true ancestry. I won't go too much into it, but I just wanted to point that out as it's a group of people that is very rarely represented in any media. Although if you are familiar with Shaman King, you may remember a character called Usui or Trey, who represents the Ainu tribe in that show. They are often depicted wearing these headbands with intricate patterns, which can also be observed by the characters in this game. As Jin and Fu wonder where Mugen is, we snap back to him being taken care of by Worso himself, who has given Mugen some medicine, but he will need to defeat the witch to fully cure himself of the snake's venom. He also tells us of a legend of 3 people who will come to help bring peace to these lands. These 3 will come in the form of a Picta man, a Sesam man, and a woman searching for a man who smells of sunflowers, clearly referring to our protagonists, with the first 2 referring to Mugen and Jin respectively. I did eventually find out that Sesam is an Ainu word for a Japanese person, but I couldn't find much information on the word Picta, but most likely it's a word referring to the people of the Ryukyu Islands. Another Ainu word that comes up a lot is Kamui. You may be more familiar with the Japanese way of writing it, but these essentially are divine or spiritual beings in Ainu mythology. As Mugen drifts away, Worso gives him a red orb that he needs to keep safe. Fast forward a little to when some more ninjas attempt to ambush the sleeping Mugen, we get our first proper stage of the game, and after walking a bit forward we encounter some strange looking barriers leading to seemingly nowhere. So while most chapters will start you in a town where you can walk around and shop, for the few levels that don't have that section, they put these barriers which you can use to enter the stores. I'll go over these when we get to the actual town, but for now just know that you can only enter these one time, as once you leave, the barrier will disappear. I'm not really going to talk much about the levels themselves, as they are all incredibly basic and straightforward. The enemies you encounter are very simple to take down, especially at this stage of the game, but it's a good time to get used to the game's mechanics and make a bit of initial cash which we can multiply later in town. We also encounter our first Koban gate, for which you will need 8 Koban to get through. After which we encounter the leader of the ninjas we just fought, Zembanosuke, who reveals the name of their group to be the Black Tengu and they are working for the Matsumai clan. As the first boss, there isn't much to him. You can very easily defeat him by just mashing.
Zembanosuke Karata. I should have expected no less of the man who defeated our army so completely.
After defeating him, Mugen comes across a burning manor where some black and white Tengu are fighting, so he decides to join on the fun and we have to dispatch 20 enemies. Afterwards, we encounter the witch again. Mugen tries to attack her but is unable to. Thankfully, Worso strikes once again to save his hide. The witch runs away and after a lovely conversation with Worso, we are told to meet him at the top of the manor. Going inside the burning building, we have more enemies to defeat and eventually come up across another Koban gate. Really, even in a burning building, these people will not stop hustling. After making it to the top, Mugen encounters Jin. A good way to describe their relationship would be beef on side, but respectfully. The two as usual ready to fight each other but are interrupted by Worso. It seems like he has some grand plan and wants us to stick around a bit longer. He tells Mugen to keep the blue gem safe, which seems to be an error as Mugen was very clearly given a red gem and the blue gem is held by a completely different person. Mugen starts feeling weak again from the witch's curse and they both hear a scream which seems to belong to Fu. To be continued. Chapter 2. Mugen is walking around the street when he sees a wanted poster for himself, after which he is attacked by the legendary warrior Genzaburo Saotome.
I'm gonna strike you down! Shut up.
The group is enjoying some shaved ice as a man approaches with a letter for Mugen, which turns out to be a challenge written in blood. As Mugen returns to his inn room, he senses someone has got there first. It's the man who sent Mugen the challenge, Tobimatsu. His teeth aren't the only thing strange about him, as when Mugen tries to stab him, his sword isn't able to do any harm. He asks again to meet Mugen at the appointed time and hops out of the window. We finally get to explore the town. First you have the two shops, one in the southernmost part of the map and another a little bit north. Both of these sell the exact same items, however for different prices. You can only buy one item across both stores and these can boost your attack, defense, increase the amount of money you earn, or how fast you gain tension. I don't really see the reason to have two stores, especially since you are limited to one item total, but this whole going between shops does bring me to another annoying issue with this game, which are the loading screens. It's the worst in town because entering and exiting each store has its own lengthy loading screen, and the town itself is split into two loading zones as well. I can't complain too much with this being a PS2 game, but it is a point of annoyance. But going out to the other part of town to the west, you can find two other stores, with the first being the weapon shop. Here you can buy unlocked weapons, equip them, and repair any that have been broken in previous levels. Your equipment, money, and everything else carries between all chapters, by the way. Weapons you unlock for beating stages are automatically added to your inventory. However, ones unlocked for trance mode need to be purchased first. The different weapons do have power and durability ratings to help you decide which one you would want to equip, but for some reason these ratings have been removed from the English version and can only be found in the original Japanese version. All you have left is a bit of flavor text that isn't very helpful, but hey, at least the English version has a pause button, which the original didn't. Further north you have a record shop where you can buy more tracks and change which ones you have currently equipped. It's nice to experiment with different tracks to keep the game a bit more interesting, but I do recommend having one track that you enjoy using and feel is useful for some later chapters. That's all in terms of stores, but there are a few more places we can check out in town. First is the eating contest, which mainly just has you mashing buttons just like in Tate mode, with occasionally having to press a QTE for extra time. Getting a new record or scoring past a certain amount of points, which I assume is 100, will net you a new piece of art for the gallery, meaning you don't need to depend on hyper mode to get them all. The other stall has beetle fighting, which is how you can max out your cash pretty quickly. You bet on one of 3 beetles and then watch a turn-based battle between them. It's basically just gambling, but you can save scum to make a lot of money very fast. I recommend doing that just so you don't have to worry about money in general. Not that it's a big deal as you only use it to buy items and weapons, but this game is grindy enough to just play alone, so I'll take any help I can. The last place you can visit in town is the dojo. You can actually access it through the main menu, but that way will only let you do it as Mugen. You can use this place to test out your combos and get a tutorial on some of the moves. Once you're all set, you can go all the way north and leave the town up the stairs, which will progress the game. Mugen travels to Mount Sengen, where you fight through more hordes of the Black Tengu and eventually some samurai, which I'm so tired of hearing them say the exact same line each time one spawns. Once you make it all the way to the end and pay the troll toll, we finally encounter Zabimatsu, who is looking a little bit different. Like a disappointed parent, Mugen just doesn't get his fresh style, so the battle begins. This one is a bit more of a challenge than the first one, as he will keep throwing these bombs all over the place, some of which will create holes that you can easily fall down into and you'll have to slowly jump out of. Just take it a bit slower and he should still be quite easy to take down. Again, the continues are incredibly generous and will just put you right at the start of the fight if you lose your health. After defeating him, Mugen tells him a little riddle and does things to him we just can't show on camera. With a backdrop of bloody rain, Mugen finds out he has 3 days left to live due to the snake's poison already having reached his brain. Not all hope is lost, however, as a snake charmer can apparently neutralize the poison. A girl nearby overhears this and seemingly is able to help Mugen, though her personality seems to get on his nerves just a bit. She looks like a slutty version of Fu and is actually called Yu. We cut to our protagonists in the inn when Mugen suddenly leaves. The other two get suspicious of his frequent outings and decide to follow him. Mugen seems to be essentially trapped on a date that he really doesn't want to be on. going shopping and to a restaurant in hopes of getting this girl to help him with his snake problem. Eventually though, she tells him to get a gem called the Heaven Smile from a nearby mansion. We can then restock in town and head to the Izumo Palace where we get attacked by some enemies. In some Mugen levels, you will have these glowing spots that tell you to press X. It's not the most intuitive, but you need to press X again during the peak of your jump to actually grab onto the floor above. Make your way for the mansion until you get to a room with a person chained to a bed. Mugen finds the gem he was looking for, but starts getting a little bit suspicious, and we proceed further inside the mansion. Eventually, we encounter Jin, who seems to have finished fighting himself. They both hear a scream coming from the other side of the door, and they find Fu, who had her own battle against a meal that could feed a village. The two are not impressed. We cut to Mugen meeting with the girl from earlier on the bridge. The girl does seem to be really into Mugen and asks him to put the necklace he found on her. They have a bit of a moment together and she bursts into flower petals. Hard cut to Jin and Fu speaking with the fortune teller from the beginning of the chapter, who seems to explain what happened. People who have witnessed the witch have the ability to become snake charmers, and in exchange for their own life they can save someone else's. But most snake charmers aren't ready to do that and are instead hunted down by the witch. It seems the girl was actually in love with Mugen, and despite their brief time together, decided to give her life to save his. So I guess we're cured now? Next chapter. We start with a straight up creepypasta about an old Yakuza boss called Tsubaki, who one day started acting weird and massacred his gang and daughter, who apparently was trying to elope with one of his men. The story says he turned into an Oni and still lives in the mountain pass, hunting anyone who goes there. We cut to Mugen enjoying a nice meal as a strange monkey with a pompadour starts pestering him. The monkey starts talking, which is totally normal, and tells us that Fu has been kidnapped again. The monkey gets a little brave and asks to have a bit of Mugen's food, which he is not super thrilled by, and tells the monkey to go suck a banana. This blatant ignorance enrages the monkey, as it is obviously gorillas that suck on bananas, and in his anger, he kinda slips out that he's the one who kidnapped Fu. We cut to Fu questioning why are they still in Ezo when she encounters the male pattern baldness monkey, who charms her and hits her with the Kiryu tiger claw. Stock up in town and head out to Hyakken Pass, where Mugen is getting bored and tells the monkey to summon some enemies. We now have to cut down squadrons of monkey until we make it to the boss of the monkeys himself, Afro Monkey. It seems he isn't very pleased with the Pompadour monkey's actions, and his possession, alongside his life, is terminated. We then have a boss fight against the monkeys. You have to kill a few of the normal enemies before the Afro monkey shows up, but it's still quite an easy fight. The monkeys can throw stuff at you, making them slightly more dangerous than the normal enemies you've encountered so far, so be wary of that. After we beat the boss monkey, he tells us how humans who lose their heart turn into an Oni. As he takes his last breath, a figure appears behind Mugen, ready to attack. It appears to be the Oni Tsubaki we learned from the creepypasta earlier. Hearing the story really piqued Mugen's interest, which is why he wanted to come here in the first place, so the two can battle. This fight isn't all too bad either. You just need to be wary of his tornado attack, which you can't block through. After getting him low in health, a cutscene plays where the Oni is unimpressed by Mugen's moves, and we have to fight him again. Or you would in the Japanese version, but here it just skips past it to the next cutscene, where the Oni reveals just how much Oni-pilled he is.
I've got an Oni's heart, an Oni's strength, and an Oni's moves. My name is Onigami.
After that, you fight him once again, but none of your attacks seem to deal any damage. After hitting him a few times, you will get a prompt teaching you about a special move which I haven't mentioned before. By pressing an attack button, which is either square or triangle, at the same time as you press circle, you will do a special move that will take some of your health in exchange for using it. Honestly, I kept forgetting this move even exists, as I never actually used it in battle besides the few times where it forces you to, like it does here. Use the technique on the boss and he will go down in one hit. A bit anticlimactic after all that Oni talk, but afterwards, Fu pops up, completely unharmed and unaware of the fact she has been kidnapped. Chapter 5. We learn about a story about a beautiful girl who, despite receiving the 12 blessings of life, still craved for more, and reached out to the world beyond to enter a forbidden realm, where she stayed for a long time. Enjoying her time there, she filled the barren land with nature using her magic, and was beloved by the creatures there. Eventually, with the passage of time, the woman ended up being all alone and committed a sin of poisoning a traveler from the land of the 12 blessings. This caused her to lose her magical abilities, and without the power to make even flowers bloom again, she plunged further into despair and fled into a world of sleep. This story seems to give Mugen an idea on how he can finally defeat the witch for good, as he demonstrates his incredible ability to fall asleep. We are then transported to Mugen's dream world, which looks like a bootleg Mario game. We have some shop barriers that you can use to restock, but otherwise it's a straightforward line to the end. This level has a bit of a difficulty spike, with the enemies here being a lot more aggressive, often lunging at you with attacks. That paired with you being locked to this 2D plane makes it a lot easier to get hit. But again, the continue system is very generous and any enemies you defeated will not respawn. Getting a game over here does have a special cutscene where Fu and Jin wake Mugen up to check up on him, believing that he may be suffering from sleep apnea, after which he falls asleep again before even finishing his own sentence. The level itself is fairly short, but you will need to collect 18 Kobans for the gate at the end. Once you get them, you can just dash to the exit. Mugen comes face to face with the witch, where we fight what I consider to be one of the hardest bosses in the game. The witch has a tower of orbs protecting her at all times, making it risky to even approach, and after one attack she will disappear and do one of several big moves where more orbs spawn all around the stage that you need to avoid. These can be fairly easily learned. The bigger issue comes from some of her normal attacks when she's on stage, which can easily decimate your health bar if you get caught in the wrong spot. I highly recommend saving your special weapons until you get more comfortable with fighting her and have dealt some damage already. The camera, while not very helpful throughout most of the game, is an actual enemy here. You want to make sure that you are near the bottom of the screen before she appears so you can quickly react and chase her down. If you are fast enough, you may be able to get to her before she does any of her more annoying moves. The background as well make it hard to tell where the edges of the stage are, so be mindful of the minimap in your positioning so you don't accidentally stand somewhere where you can't dodge attacks. Once you learn all the patterns, they're not too bad to avoid, though the controls can still cause you to run into some attacks by accident. After many attempts, we beat her ass so bad she turns into a Discord kitten.
Oh no! This is bad! Very bad! I'm dying! I haven't loved it all yet! I haven't lived it all yet! I don't want to die when I'm still so young! Besides, it's my duty to protect this land!
So, how old are you now?
I'm only 12.
Get real, would you?
120.
Mugen finishes off the witch for good and she turns into a butterfly. He later wakes up and shares with us some words of wisdom.
You know, the thing about butterflies is they can't fly very far.
Charming.
Chapter 6 starts with someone storming the inn, with Fu being all alone in her room. We then cut to a man who is frustrated with Mugen and Jin taking down all of their associates, sending another assassin after them, specifically Mugen though. Jin and Mugen return to the inn to find Fu missing and a letter from the assassin, so we stock up in town and head out to Nita Swamp. Quick note, as it is evening in game, the eating and beetle minigames are unavailable in this chapter for some reason. By now, the stages in this game have gotten ridiculously long, some taking around an hour, so skipping enemies is definitely a great idea to save your sanity, but be mindful of the Koban gates or you have to embarrassingly backtrack to find more enemies. There are a lot of side paths you can take in this level which can lead to some items in case you need some health, but eventually we make it through all the enemies and after a small chat we battle against the assassin. He will just disappear each time you try to hit him though, and after a few attempts another cutscene will play. Mugen taunts him some more, but the nonchalant assassin claims that the conditions aren't right just yet to fight properly. Swing your sword a few more times at him, and another cutscene will play where the moon starts shining and the flowers around them start to bloom. With the perfect backdrop, the assassin is ready to fight for real. Not before dissing Mugen's vibes though. This is a pretty fun fight. He will still teleport around, but you can actually hit him finally. Most of his attacks can be blocked besides this whirlwind which you have to avoid. My advice would be to just keep moving to make sure you avoid the whirlwind and get a few hits in after he misses an attack. As his health decreases, he will get stronger and will even gain the ability to enter his own hyper mode. Just like with the witch, save your special weapons for when he powers up and you're more comfortable fighting against him, so you don't waste them. We defeat the assassin, whose name is Baraishi, and he quickly drops the cool guy act after Mugen decides to take him up on the offer to kill him. He tells him that Fu is being kept in the castle, but Mugen ends up slicing him down anyway. It's time for the final chapter of Mugen's story. The enemies we fought throughout have had enough of Jin and Mugen's meddling. Their leader tries to make some grand speech, but kids these days have no respect for their elderly. Despite his boasting, the two cut him down in an instant and we begin our fight. No shops here as you have to kill 30 enemies, though you will get some gates later. After dealing with the enemies, Fu starts screaming from the top of the castle and they make their way over there. This level is incredibly long. You will essentially have to do it 3 times as well. You'll face pretty much every type of enemy you have encountered so far in the story and be met with many Koban gates. Most of them require 6 Koban to get through, besides the first one which asks for 7. So make sure you stock up and have enough at all times so you don't need to backtrack. As it seems when you just need one, the enemies start refusing to drop any. There really isn't much to note with this stage besides its daunting length, which, by the way, I clocked 94 minutes on my first run. Anyway, after you make it through the many floors of the castle, you will end up at the top, where we see Worso again, just having finished a fight and looking a bit more crazy than usual. Everything has been going according to the prophecy though, and Worso hands Mugen the blue gem. Mugen and Jin start getting some doubts about him, wondering if he turned into an Oni as well, but as he talks about returning to his native land, the gem starts glowing and a beam of light rises into the sky, which then strikes the surrounding towers. Fu does a little fourth wall breaking.
It's not like I've had any screen time in this stupid thing, but I could at least be doing something in the scenes that I'm in.
Games have their own way of doing things.
Then a giant bear-looking monster appears and advances towards the castle. On the other side, another giant bear appears, although this one is mechanized. Time for the final battle against Mecha Higumadon. He hits like a truck, but most of his attacks are very easy to avoid. Take your time, slashing at him whenever you see an opening, and he should go down in no trouble. The 2 bears disappear with the strangest death sounds I've ever heard. Worso seems to be satisfied with the outcome, with everything going exactly as the myth prophesized, and he treats the gang to a massive meal. Roll credits. Well, we obviously aren't done just yet, since we still have Jin's story, but the group starts wondering about some unanswered questions they had, which unlocks Worso's story. So yeah, you actually get 3 story modes in total, although Worso's is much shorter with only 4 chapters. Before that though, let's have a look at where Jin's story takes us. The beginning of the game is exactly the same as in Mugen's story, up to the point where you defeat the first batch of enemies in chapter 0, after which we see Worso and 2 other people observing him. Jin then walks alone into the snowstorm, noting north is his unlucky direction. Moving on to chapter 1, where we again get a rundown of the story with the Matsuma and the Tsumeraki clans, and Jin and Fu worrying about Mugen. After that, we get to explore the town as Jin, where I want to point out a special track we got for finishing Mugen's story. It's called Flatline, and it will let you enter a short hyper mode anytime you strike an enemy. The only downside to it is that each time it will take some of your health in exchange, but honestly, this isn't a big deal since you can recover health with Tate mode quite easily. But it does break most of the game, letting you get through the remaining chapters a lot quicker. It won't be as helpful with bosses, where you'd want to have more control, but it's amazing for getting through normal enemies quicker with how much of a slog these levels are. It let me finish Jin's story in almost half the time it took me to get through Mugen's, so I highly recommend it. Once ready though, you can exit the town, which will take you to another cutscene where Jin is approached by a cracked out bear. An Ainu girl appears behind him saying a chant, after which the bear goes away. The girl's name is Nochiyu and she is the sister of Worso, who tells us about this place and calls Jin one of the saviors, taking him to her home. There we meet another Ainu called Ranke, who has an incredibly big stature. He speaks with Jin, who is just confused about everything, but he joins them for a meal where we learn about Nochiyu being of the old blood and having the ability to communicate with the Kamui. Similar to the Japanese Shinto teachings, the Ainu also believe there are spirits called Kamui that inhabit all things in the world, including forces of nature. Their chat is cut short as some enemies attack their hut. We are then tasked with taking down 28 enemies before we learn that they were after the blue gem that Nochiyu is keeping safe. They suspect that the Tsurumaki Manor has been attacked, so they decide to go there to help out Worso, which Jin accompanies them to pay back for their help with the bear and food. We then have to go through a couple of straight paths with enemies, but eventually get another cutscene where we learn more about our Ainu companions and how the people who came to this land want to get the gems they are protecting to unleash the secret power within them. Afterwards, fight some more enemies and we get to the mansion which has been set ablaze. No-Chiu senses Worso is still inside, so uses her powers to communicate with the fire and reduce its intensity, after which Jin goes in alone to rescue Worso. We then have to make our way through the burning mansion until we get to the cutscene where we meet up with Mugen and Worso we saw in Mugen's story. I won't recount the scenes we already saw, so let's move on to when we leave the mansion where Fu is holding the dying Ranke, who tells us No-Chiu and the gem have been taken away. With the manor still burning in the background, we end chapter 1. Jin and Fu are chilling in town while a man is watching them from behind. Fu is questioning why are they still in town when some samurai approach them and we have to eliminate them. Afterwards, the man who was spying on us earlier introduces himself as Hanaoka, who was seemingly testing Jin and offers to treat them to a meal to make up for the attack. With a deal of buttered potatoes, the two join him at a tavern where Hanaoka explains that he is hunting a man called Ray the Invincible, a powerful warrior who has struck down Hanaoka's entire dojo, including his master. As the sole survivor, he is ridden with guilt and asks Jin to help him in taking down this formidable fighter, who has been sighted on Mount Sengen. Fu is suspicious of the man, but Jin accepts the job. We travel to Mount Sengen where we eventually come upon an old man eating a rice ball. While he looks like a confused old man lost in the woods, this is the famous Ray the Invincible. He asks to cross swords with Jin, after he finishes his meal of course. And once he's done, he draws his cane. Well, try all you like, but he will block every single one of your attacks. But he also won't attack you back either. Keep hitting him for a bit and a cutscene will play revealing his secret.
I am Ray the Invincible. I never lose, but I never win either.
Suddenly, some arrows fly by targeting the two. Jin deflects them and Ray reveals that the men who hired Jin are in fact working for the Matsumae, the big bad guys who are controlling Ezo. Hanaoka tries to weasel his way out of it, but Fu comes running to tell us she overheard them speaking about eliminating both Jin and Ray. She would have told us earlier, but went into a food coma. With Jin's sights set on Hanaoka instead, they take Fu hostage, which just ends with Jin throwing some arrows to save her. We then have a boss fight against Hanaoka, although just like with the monkeys, you need to defeat some enemies before he joins the stage. He's incredibly easy though, so he goes down quickly. After the battle, they notice Ray has disappeared as well, and the chapter ends. Chapter 3 starts with a small lecture on strange phenomena related to things falling from the sky, such as rains of fish and frogs, which are apparently very common in the strange land of Europe. It then goes over the dances used to summon rain and wonders if such summoning techniques could be used to call forth a rain of something other than water, which leads us to the sky turning red as a rain of blood showers down upon the town. Fast forward to Jin enjoying a meal when a man behind the counter tells him that there's a rumor going around that the bloody showers were caused by a botched rain prayer. Jin questions this, which gets the old man rambling and he slips off the name Tsurumaki, after which he gets visibly nervous. Jin pays his bill, but back at the inn he starts wondering if No-Chiu may be connected to that rain. Since the clouds gathered from the northeast, he concludes whatever summoned it must come from there, and luckily there's only one place it could be, the Izumo Palace, which has one of those fancy things called a ristorante. This is also the place where Mugen went to get the gem for the girl, and now Jin decides to investigate it as well. We then get a police report on the Izumo Palace, which under the guise of a family restaurant is actually a secret base of the red-haired, blue-eyed European aristocrats who have received special rights in Ezo by the Matsumae, and seem to have been doing a lot of their dirty work. They made this area their personal hunting grounds, and you can assume what kind of special cuisine they're into. The policeman making this report, Manzo de Sol, also suspects that they are responsible for the blood rain and is out to investigate the manor himself. However...
Who are you? How dare you thwack me on the back of the head while I'm doing my best to provide a proper and well-balanced narration? What did you say to me? They're here! It's the demons! Curse you! Stay away! Come any closer and I'll strike you down! I said stay away! Please? Pretty please?
Moving on to Fu walking around when she notices the girl Mugen was hanging out with crying alone. She's quickly interrupted by a nice red-haired blue-eyed European with a bad German accent. He asks her out on a date and the mention of food was enough to seal the deal. I mean, how can you refuse this smile? Restock in town and move on to Izumo Palace, where we have a welcoming committee waiting for us. We slash our way through the place and eventually come upon the master of the palace, Jester King Dracula with big ol' honkus. he seems to know not just about the group, but also the Ainu prophecy, which is why he's trying to get rid of them, despite the Matsumae apparently not being too concerned with it. He also confesses that it was him who caused the blood rain, which happened when he tried to use the blue gem. He still has the gem, but it seems Nochiyu was taken away by the Black Tengu. In either case, we have a boss fight against Bulikin Rosha. Great name, I know. He can be a bit of a challenge with some of his unblockable moves, but they are quite well telegraphed. Honestly, what messed me up most is when I'd accidentally enter Jin's stance mode and not be able to dodge in time. Once you get rid of him, Mugen shows up, and just like in his story, they find Fu pigging out in the other room. Upon returning to the inn, Jin notices the blue orb he got from the mansion has broken in half, meaning he got bamboozled with a fake one. The group starts wondering what the hell is going on in town and who may be the true mastermind behind all of the factions they've been fighting. Not being able to come to any conclusion though, Mugen and Jin go for a walk. Separately, of course. Since the Black Tengu have taken Nochiyu, Jin asks someone in town where he may be able to find them and gets pointed towards Hyakken Pass, although it seems to be a trap. Do whatever you gotta do in town and head out to the next destination. After enjoying fighting more hordes of Black Tengu in a level that would make Final Fantasy XIII proud of its design, we re-encounter Rei the Invincible, who reveals to be the leader of the Tengu and challenges us again. As expected, he blocks every attack you throw at him, but after hitting him enough, we get a tutorial teaching us the special technique where you have to press the attack and technique button at the same time. Use it on Rei and he goes down in one hit. One of the Tengu then approaches Jin and reveals to be Nochiyu. She says how the White Tengu are allied with the Ainu people and it's the Black Tengu that are against them. We then learn how all shamans are born into the Tsurumaki family, while Rei is part of the bloodline that protects them. In order to keep them safe, they decided to disguise themselves as the Tengu from the Japanese legends to keep their powers a secret. The Matsumae have discovered their tactics and adopted them themselves, becoming the Black Tengu who they often end up clashing against. Jin then informs Nochiyu of the death of Rankei and the lost blue gem. However, she seems to be already aware of that and is confident the prophesized time is coming soon. Chapter 5 starts with a story of a snow doll, where an old couple builds a child out of snow which comes alive with a kiss. The old couple, overcome with joy, name her Yuki Musume and raise her as their own daughter. As the seasons passed and temperatures rose, Yuki Musume started to grow weaker, but one summer day she was invited to play in the forest with some other children. At night, the children recalled an old tale that claimed jumping over a fire would bring you eternal happiness. All the girls started jumping over the small fire they made, and when it came to Yuki Musume's turn, as soon as she went above the flame, she turned into a mist that flew up into the sky. As the other children began calling out for her, all they heard was a laughter, followed by a rain of blood. We cut to Jin resting in his room. Annoyed about the lack of answers, he takes a nap, which brings us to another dream sequence. Similar to Mugen, you have a long 2D stretch of enemies with a Koban gate at the end that will require you to collect 18 Kobans. Dying here does also have a special cutscene where Fu says you'll lose if you fall asleep, and Jin is confused about who they are. Once you make it through the sea of JPEGs, you will have a boss fight against this giant red Oni. Well, actually, he's just chilling in the background posing, and you have to attack the floating mask in the middle. This fight is nowhere near bad as the witch one, since the mask will just stand in the middle, but the fire attacks coming from the nearby statues can cause you some pain. Once you beat the mask, the Oni flies away like a scrap of paper and a giant Mugen appears, who manages to get a hit on Jin. We again have to attack the floating mask, but now this time stuck in this 2D plane, with Mugen stomping around. He doesn't actually attack, so you can only get hurt by him stomping on you. The mask teleports constantly now, so you have to chase after it and weave in and out of Mugen's legs. This fight is even easier than the one before, so we take on Big Mugen and Jin wakes up. He theorizes this dream was sent to him, most likely by Nochiyu, and notices the wound he got in the fight against Big Mugen appearing in real life. Chapter 6 starts the same as in Mugen's side, with someone trying to storm the inn to kidnap Fu and then another assassin being sent out, this time to hunt for Jin. Restock in town and then leave, which will bring you back to town where some samurai come to fight against Jin. Proceed with the level as usual until you get to the bridge where Jin encounters the female assassin sent after him. She starts hitting on Jin and reveals her name to be Gecko, after which the two end up drinking in a tavern. Despite Jin's caution and not having a single drop of alcohol, she still reveals to have been successful in poisoning him, and he drops down like a fly. He then wakes up tied up on a ship, with the assassin having some questions for him regarding Nochiyu's whereabouts. Surprisingly, Jin reveals everything, claiming that he will kill her anyway or die himself. Noticing her swords, he concludes that surely as a warrior, she would want to have a duel against him. Gecko, seeing the wound on his arm, assumes that she would have the advantage, and in exchange for the information earlier, reveals her employer is a Buddhist priest controlling the Matsumae clan, who is holed up in Ezo Castle. She unties Jin and the two samurai ready for their duel. All of her attacks can be blocked, but try to keep your attack chains short as she can easily capitalize on your attack animations. Keep blocking and getting a couple hits in between her attacks and you should be able to deal with her with relative ease. After the fight, Jin notices she was holding back, worried about his wounded arm. The two, despite being on opposing sides, have had a clear connection and they share one final moment together in the moonlight. The final chapter of Jin's story is pretty much exactly the same as Mugen's, an hour-long tedious journey to the top of Ezo Castle, with the only notable difference being the final boss, who isn't even that much different. As Jin, you find a non-mechanized version of Higumadon, which does have some different attacks, like this fire one that covers the entire screen and really caught me off guard the first time. I assume you can block it, but he never did it again, and this fight is quite easy. Once defeated, the ending is also exactly the same as well. The ritual is complete and the group gets their food. Before moving on to Worso's story and finishing this game properly, I want to quickly go over some of the extras you can find in the game. I already mentioned the dojo you can access from the main menu, though you only get to play as Mugen there. Special reward below it is actually just your gallery. This is where all the art, or ukiyo as they call it, you unlock throughout trance mode and the eating minigame is located. I could not go through unlocking all of these as I actually have some respect for my controller, but it seems to be mainly the images you see in loading screens. Next up is Deathmatch, which unlocks when you beat the game as either character. It's a fairly basic multiplayer minigame where you can duel against another person. You can only select from the 3 main characters and don't have access to different tracks or weapons. It's a nice addition. It would have been nicer if they added some of the bosses from the game to it, but it's better than nothing. The final thing, and exclusive to the North American version, is trailer, which is just the trailer for the English dub of the show. With all that out of the way, let's check out the final story of this game. To begin Worso's story, we need to go back in time a little. Okay, that's too far. 3 weeks ago, Worso and Ray had a conversation where we learned that since Worso's father's demise, he is now responsible for conducting the ritual that will summon the bear spirit. Despite Worso and his sister being separated for most of their lives, it is finally time for them to reunite and bring the 2 gems they have kept safe together. He is then tasked to go to the sacred land of the Old Blood and encounter the bear god. We then get control of Worso and can visit some shop gates to restock. In terms of gameplay, Worso plays similarly to Mugen, mainly with both of them having the ability to jump with X. He seems to be a pretty strong character in general, with his 2 blades and spitting combos being pretty safe against a lot of enemies, and with the experience of playing the other 2 characters, as well as the broken flatline track, this playthrough should go pretty fast. We go through the forest cleaning up monkeys along the way until we get to the shack that Uchiu is residing in. The 2 siblings finally reunite, and with the worst glowing effects I've seen in this game, they summon the spirit of the bear god, which Worso goes after. After clearing out some more enemies, he eventually makes it to a cave where you face off against the disproportionate white bear. Like most first bosses, he doesn't do too much and you can get behind him and slash at him until he goes down. Worso then brings back the dead bear to the White Tengu hideout where it'll be used to feed the clan, and Nochiu offers a prayer to the gods for the bounty. Chapter 2 starts us right in town, so once you are ready, leave town to get to town where Worso gets harassed by some guards asking for his entry permit. While he argues that this land is supposed to be free for anyone to come and go as they please, as was decided by his father and the lord, the guards, by the order of Lord Matsumae, disagree and start questioning Worso. He uses a fake surname to not give himself away, although falls quickly after they ask him to spell it. Worso demands to see the lord, angry with the premise of the land of his ancestors being taken away. The guards get fed up dealing with him and attack. We are then tasked with dispatching 30 enemies, after which we get a cutscene where Worso gets reprimanded for the commotion he caused. Ray reminds Worso of his father, who would always try to resolve things without fighting, to which Worso points out how the agreement his father worked for is being disregarded, with the natives not being able to even enter their land. The group discusses the current predicament but is unable to reach a suitable conclusion on what they should do, so Worso decides to visit his sister again to ask her the will of the Kamui. We retrace our path from the previous chapter, this time finding Black Tengu along the way, until we reach Uchiu's cabin. There, Uchiu tells us of the prophecy which involves a man of the old blood becoming an Oni to slay the Kijin who have disturbed the order of the land. After which, the 3 saviors will come who will complete a ritual in the place of the man of the old blood, restoring balance to the land. The Oni will burn away, and the people of the old blood will find a new place where they can live in peace. Worso then decides to go see for himself what the 3 saviors are like, if he is to entrust the red orb to them. But before he leaves, Nochiu warns him that the Kamui will be testing him as well. For reference, this is happening during chapter 0 of Mugen and Jin's story, as Uchiu mentions Mugen has already been poisoned by the witch. We continue on our path and have a boss fight against Jin. He's pretty challenging to fight normally, but you can spam circle to keep using your counterattack. It can be a bit random even if you do spam it, but you can get him stuck in a loop where he tries to counterattack and you just deflect it right back. With a sliver of health left, we beat Jin, and it turns out Worso was just fighting a willow tree. Well, this tree definitely knew how to throw hands. We get some items for our efforts and we can continue onwards to fight Blue Mugen. He's a lot easier than Jin and doesn't counter as much, meaning you can actually get your full combos out. After bullying Bluegen, we find out that Worso was actually fighting a tree from the southern islands. After defeating the tree spirits that were sent to test Worso, he meets up with Rei, who tells us Kuninishi, the old woman we saw in some of the previous cutscenes, has disappeared. They conclude that she has been working with the Matsumae and the Black Tengu, and Rei, along with the White Tengu, decide to leave this place to find a new home. He says his farewells to Worso, who then senses the Black Tengu around. The Tengu reveal themselves alongside Kuninishi, who believes they should use the gems to create wealth that could save their people. Worso disagrees, believing if the gems are misused they could only bring about great ruin. With their ideologies clashing, we have another boss fight, this time against Kuninishi. You can't actually hit her as she will just teleport around, so you have to deal with the Black Tengu troops first. After clearing all of them out, you can finish Kuninishi in one hit. Worso questions her as to why she would betray them after taking in Worso and his sister after their father's death. She reveals it was her who convinced their father to go after the Kijin and subsequently sold him out to the Matsumae. She then tells Worso to strike her down so he can become the Oni to fulfill the prophecy. With Worso already becoming an Oni in his heart, he becomes known as a serial killer, eliminating anyone he deems to have broken the agreement his father made. We first have to fight off 30 guards, after which the monk appears declaring Worso an Oni and gaslighting him into believing his clothes are dirty. Where? We then have a sort of a boss rush, with the spirit of Mugen's first boss and the leader of the Black Tengu, Kurata, appearing to challenge us. He's just as easy as he was the first time. Then we fight the spirits of Hanaoka and later Tsubaki. After which we learn that Ezo Castle is no longer in the hands of the Matsumae, but by someone called Master Antonioni. We fast forward to Fu running away and encountering Worso, after which they are found by the assassin sent to hunt for Mugen. Worso realizes that Fu may be one of the free people from the prophecy, but before he can do anything about that, he's pitted against the Power Rangers from Hell. You have to fight all 9 of them, but the battles are split into 3 batches of 3. They're not necessarily hard to take down individually, but with the subpar camera angle and their large size, makes it very easy to get hit and die. If you can counter their attacks with Circle, you can do some pretty decent damage that way. Once you defeat all 9 of the Oni, you learn a bit more about the people who have taken over Ezo, how they were driven out of their own land and resolved to make a new home here. While they were easily able to control the greedy Matsumae, the people of the Old Blood posed a bigger issue to them. Despite the welcoming nature of those of the Old Blood, the Kijin leaders saw things differently and didn't wish to coexist. This desire to control everything through force resulted in all of his men turning into Kijin themselves. With all that, the stage is set for the final encounter at Ezo Castle. Worso shares a final moment with Nochu before telling her to go with Rei and departing for Ezo Castle himself. We once again have to make the long trek all the way to the top of the castle as we did with Jin and Mugen. Once on the top, we get to see the true culprit behind all of the events that transpired, Lord Antonioni, who is spending some quality time with Fu. Before anything can happen though, Worso pops by. Antonioni admits to being in possession of the blue gem and hopes that he will be able to combine it with the red gem to gain unimaginable wealth. With Worso ready to make him pay for his crimes, we begin our true final battle of the game. He's more challenging than the previous final bosses, but it's a much more fun fight. You generally want to keep your distance when he's attacking as usual, but he has some pretty obvious tells. The 2 attacks you need to watch out for are the fast dash he'll do across the stage and his slam attack, which you will need to jump to avoid, as standing on the ground, even if you're nowhere near him, will still hit you. He can also buff himself briefly. He will speed up when he glows blue, power up when red, and heal himself when green, which is the worst one to get as he has quite a bit of health. Once you learn his patterns, you shouldn't have much trouble whittling his health down, and once you do defeat him, he makes a very good point.
Antonioni.
You must be kidding! The truth is, you are probably wondering, who was this guy?
The rest of the story you already know. Mugen and Jin show up, the 2 orbs are brought together completing the ritual, the bears are summoned, the 2 fight them off, and get their food. There is an extra scene at the end where the 3 see Ezo Castle in flames. They'll conclude that this was most likely done by Worso and return to their original journey. It seems Worso made sure to follow the prophecy exactly, and after believing himself to become an Oni, He perished alongside the fires of Ezo Castle. Nochiu and Rei look back at the burning castle before going away to find a new home they can live in peace. And this concludes the story of Samurai Champloo Sidetracked. It was a pretty fun experience overall. I don't think I would want to play through most of the levels again, definitely not after spending over 3 hours total running around Ezo Castle, but the story is told well enough and filled with a lot of entertaining encounters that really fit the spirit of Samurai Champloo. It has some great ideas, trying to experiment with different mechanics, but ultimately falls a little short in the gameplay aspect. But I wouldn't say I wasted my time with it, though I am really glad for their generous continue system because I don't think I could get through this game if I had to restart a level from the beginning each time I died. I did find a lot more enjoyment with the game's bosses, most of them being quite unique and challenged me to experiment with different mechanics, like all good bosses should. If you are a fan of the series and are really craving some more Samurai Champloo, I would recommend checking this game out yourself, as it really does scratch that itch. But may God have mercy on your controller. That's about it for this video. Thank you for watching it all the way to the end, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing for more videos like it. I'd also love to hear what your thoughts are on this game in the comments. Whether you played it yourself or are seeing it for the first time here, let me know. Anyway, take care for now.